Way down? Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to our Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee for June 5th, 2025. We do have quorum. My name is Kathy Daigle-Gammon. I'm Vice Chair of Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee, sitting in for our Chair, Deputy Mayor, and Tony Mancini. So we'll call the meeting to order. And the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So we'll call the meeting to order. Approval of the minutes, please, of April 3rd, 2025. Councillor Hartling, seconded by Councillor White. I have a pen that doesn't work. Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye, raising your hand. Thank you. That motion is carried. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Councillor Hartling, thank you. Councillor Steele, we'll give you the second. How's that? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Thank you. That motion is carried as well. Business rising out of the minutes, there are none. So we now ask for a call for a declaration of conflict of interest. Seeing none, we'll proceed. Motions of reconsideration, there are none. Motions of rescission, there are none. Consideration of deferred business, there is none. And notice of tabled matters, there is none. We'll move on to correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Madam Clerk Dorothy, do we have any correspondence, petitions?
Correspondence was received for agenda item 10.3.3 and circulated to the members of the committee.
Okay. And now we go on to presentations. And our first presentation is with Mr. Dave Redden, monitoring of HRM lakes for toxic cyanobacteria. So Dave Redden is with the Center for Water Resource Studies at Dalhousie University. Welcome. You have 10 minutes to present, and it can be followed by questions of clarification from the members of the committee.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here this afternoon. My name is Dave Redden. I'm a PhD candidate. And for the past 3 years, our team has been working with staff at HRM to monitor toxic cyanobacteria or blue-green algae at some popular recreational lakes around HRM. And today I just want to share kind of an overview of what we've been doing and some of the results so far. I don't think I need to convince anyone in this room about the importance of lakes to residents of HRM. Lakes are central to life in the city and are a source of civic pride. So the opportunity for our team to work with HRM in monitoring these lakes, pursuing our own research goals, but doing it at lakes that we interact with in our personal lives has been a really rewarding experience, and we're very grateful to have had this opportunity. So during the summer, the HRM provides lifeguards at select beaches in July and August. And in recent years, these beaches have been closed more and more frequently as a result of cyanobacterial blooms. So when these blooms are observed, the beach is closed, a water sample is collected and sent away to a lab for analysis. And in some cases, depending on the lab and the type of analysis requested, it can take 2 up to 14 days to obtain results. And during this time, the beach remains closed. And then, as I'm sure you can imagine, by the time the results are returned, it's hard to interpret what they mean for the current conditions in the water. And so the people making decisions about whether or not to open or close these beaches are kind of always stuck doing this with outdated information. And as a result of this, some of these beaches have remained closed for much of this beach monitoring season over the past few years. An example of that would be Kennard Pond in Spryfield, which over the 3 years that we've been involved in this program has been closed for the majority of the 2-month seasons. And so our goal in working with the city on this project has been to sort of take stock of the tools that we have available for monitoring cyanobacteria and see if we can come up with a strategy to provide information on a more reasonable time frame so that people can make decisions with the most up-to-date information possible. So cyanobacteria are naturally occurring photosynthetic bacteria that are impacted by nutrients and temperature, so namely phosphorus and nitrogen. And given the right conditions for growth, they can proliferate rapidly and form blooms. And these blooms appear as discolored water or surface scums, an example of which you can see in that photograph. So this was taken at the Shuby Beach part of Lake Charles in 2022. And while this is unsightly, the real issue is that some cyanobacteria are also capable of producing toxins. We refer to these toxins as cyanotoxins. And the toxins are not visible, and not all cyanobacteria produce the toxins. So relying on visual cues to determine the risk associated with recreating in the water is not the best approach. Health Canada currently provides guidelines for total microcystins. So microcystins are one class of cyanotoxins. And currently, Health Canada has a recreational guideline of 10 micrograms per liter for these toxins. As I said, microcystins are a class of toxins, and there are actually about 250 different types of microcystin. And microcystin LR is one of those types. It's one that's commonly used for monitoring. It's the one that's most likely to be available for analysis at a commercial lab, and it's the one that we've used in our monitoring program. As I said, there are other cyanotoxins in addition to microcystins, but Health Canada does not currently have guidelines for those. Beginning in 2022, we started working with HRM to identify some recreational lakes that would make sense for this monitoring program, and we landed on 7 lakes. And that year we began sampling in May and continued collecting weekly samples until November. We then repeated this program in 2023 and 2024. Our analysis included a broad suite of water chemistry, and then for cyanotoxins we measured microcystin LR, as well as anatoxin A, cylindrospermopsin, and saxitoxin, which are 3 other relatively common cyanotoxins. In addition to the water chemistry and toxin analysis, we also use qPCR to identify the genes required to produce these toxins. And so over this 3-year monitoring program, we've detected microcystin LR at 6 of the lakes. And oftentimes we're detecting microcystin LR in samples for which there was no visual evidence of cyanobacteria in the water at the time of sampling. But really the most important thing to take away from this is that all of the concentrations that we have measured have been well below Health Canada's recreational guideline of 10 micrograms per liter. And in fact, we've never measured concentrations above 1 microgram per liter. Just for context, Health Canada's drinking water quality guideline is 1.5 micrograms per liter, so we're actually below that as well. The qPCR work that we did identified that cyanobacteria containing the genes required for producing microcystins were present in all of the lakes, but at highly varied concentrations. And so the best way to think about this is that there are cyanobacteria in all of these lakes who have the machinery to produce microcystins, but the actual environmental and microbiological conditions that drive these cyanobacteria to actually produce the toxins are really complicated, and as a research community, we don't have a good understanding of that yet. But what we can say for sure is that microcystin production is possible in all of these lakes. So the key takeaways from the work that we've done so far is that all of these lakes have the potential to have cyanobacteria with the potential to produce microcystins, but in the 3 years of monitoring, we have never detected concentrations anywhere near the recreational guideline. And while we don't really know what drives cyanobacteria to produce microcystins, what we do know for sure is that reducing nutrient inputs like phosphorus and nitrogen is really the best strategy for limiting cyanobacterial growth and therefore reducing the risk of toxins. And since we know that all of these lakes contain cyanobacteria who could produce these toxins, continued monitoring and working towards improving our ability to monitor is really essential to ensuring safe recreation in these lakes. And again, I'd just like to reiterate how thankful we at CWRS are to have had this opportunity to work with Emma and Elizabeth and the rest of the folks at HRM to develop and carry out this monitoring program. Having a better understanding of the challenges that they face day to day has really grounded our research and really improved our ability to think about these problems. And again, monitoring cyanotoxins is complicated, and we need to continue to work towards developing innovative approaches that can allow rapid decision making and give the people making these decisions up-to-date information so they can do so. And we look forward to continuing to work together on this challenge. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge the funding that our lab receives through our NSERC Alliance partnerships. And then again, just a big thank you to Elizabeth Montgomery and Emma Waddy and everyone else at HRM for supporting us on this project. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Dave. Our first counselor with a question is Counselor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. It reminded me of a couple of years ago when cyanobacteria first kind of raised as an issue affecting enclosed Lake Bannock and Lake Micmac, and we were sending results. I was out of province to be tested, and just the lag to get anything back in a short summer season of only 2 months. I mean, it was really completely impractical, and had to basically led us to change up the approach to allow a little bit more risk. But I still don't think we have a really good kind of program around this. In your kind of working in this space, do you have any suggestions in terms of what capabilities do exist? Like, how could we actually improve our responsiveness given the local limitations on resources?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for the question. I guess this is complicated in that there are some tools available, but how feasible it would be to use them on a recurring basis is really the question. So our lab has been working with some rapid test strips that do show promise, but again, they're quite expensive. So the question of how frequently you could use them, I think, is still the main issue.
When you say quite expensive, what is quite expensive? Are we talking poverty academic or?
I'll let Elizabeth handle it.
Yes. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Councillor, through the chair to you. Right now, we use those test strips as like a confirmation. So we're fortunate to be contracted our cyanobacteria testing with a local lab starting this year. So we should be getting results more quickly, even through our regular process. Right now, we use the test strips just to confirm, like, when we have closed a beach, that the concentration hasn't changed drastically between when we sent the sample off to the lab and like when we retest. I just ordered some. We got a 20 pack and it was almost $1,000. So it's really hard to, like, we're trying to use them strategically, like, so, we're able to get up-to-date information, but also the testing itself, like, I do it, I have lab experience, like, we're not sending these off, but to operationalize it as like weekly testing with the lifeguards, it would be really challenging. Like, they can be quite finicky. So, but we have been working with Dave and Clark at his lab to validate like some of these test results, because we were also, I do duplicates. We were struggling a little bit to see the connection, like to get solid results from these test strips. So we've been working with Dave and Clark and are feeling like better about the test results that we're getting from those strips, but they can be challenging to read, and where they are so expensive and they ship from the States. We're really finding that the research partnership is giving us results just as quickly and with a much higher degree of certainty. So it isn't that they're totally cost prohibitive. Like, if they were the best way to do this, we might be pursuing it a little more, but with some of that uncertainty and with the low levels that we've been seeing through their research, it isn't something that we're investigating, like, doubling down on at this time, if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor Austin. Elizabeth, just for some of our newer councillors and the people, if you might just do your position, introduce yourself and your position.
I'm so sorry. I am not great at the protocol here. I apologize. Madam Chair, thank you for that prompt. I'm Elizabeth Montgomery. I'm the Water Resources Specialist on the Environment and Climate Change team, and I'm here today because I support our rec department with water testing for the Supervised Beach program in our lakes.
Thank you very much, and she's awesome. Our next councillor with the question is Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Dave. My question is somewhat similar to Councillor Austin's question. I've also been involved with, lake water testing, but more for a private aquatic club. So my question is, do you feel that with your research, we can improve the timelines on testing? So I'm getting the feeling that your research would be a substitute for these test strips that you bring in, or it complements. So can you speak to that? Because I think while we all would like to see active people using the beaches, we also want to keep everyone safe. So maybe you can kind of speak to that whole kind of issue around that.
Yeah, so it remains a challenge to find ways to operationalize this that would be accessible. So the work that I'm doing with qPCR, I think, shows a lot of promise, but again, it requires laboratory skills and equipment that just aren't available. So really, like the test strips seem like the most promising path forward at this point. We haven't really been able to find any other like indicator variables that we can measure quickly and easily that would give a good assessment of risk without sort of more complex laboratory analysis.
And and we don't really have a lot of capacity for that here. I know even getting basic water testing done is a bit difficult.
Thanks, Councillor. Through Vice Chair, through you to the Councillor. It is. We are, I think, like as this issue becomes more prevalent or like top of mind for folks anyway, because to Dave's point, like these aren't new. We're just, I think, hearing about them more, seeing the impacts of them more because of climate change and some of our stormwater management practices. But I think, like, I do expect, like, even in the 3 years that I've been in this position, we've seen more local capacity for testing. So not to say that I imagine it's coming. Typically if you're a resident and you want to drop off a water sample, you're going to like Nova Scotia Health Labs. As far as I'm aware, they don't do cyanotoxin testing because for the most part, you can take your lake water there. I have, but it's for drinking water, and people in wells are at extremely low risk of this in their well. So they're not prioritizing that, and the commercial labs exist, but again, it's a cost thing for a lot of like recreational groups to manage, and and the test strips. Like I don't want to downplay them. It's more about when folks use them, understanding like what it's telling you, like, yes, this is a snapshot in time, and it is accurately reflective of what's there, but water flows, these things can self-propel a little bit. And so we use it as confirmation testing at our beaches, but we haven't, part of the reason we haven't moved to them only as well is because, like, again, it's a snapshot of that moment, and to capture like what's going on in the lake, like it's challenging.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Councillor White.
Ooh, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dave and Elizabeth. This is great. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a clearer picture of what going forward looks like, because it sounds like what you're doing, Dave, is too technical to transfer, and the strips are expensive, but also you mentioned what we're normally doing recently changed. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the Councillor. So we're still continuing this research partnership. And, last year, this will be the 4th year that we are supporting that. And we're starting to get really fast signals from the Center for Water Resource Studies on these testing. So, like, can I talk? Yeah. So last year, we know that there's a pretty regular bloom that happens in like the Chubby Canal, for example. That's another place. We obviously don't monitor recreational swimming there, and it appears to be a much lower risk for folks who are like canoeing, paddleboarding, because you're not making contact with the water like as by default, like as part of the activity. And so one of their sampling locations is in the Shobi Canal. And so last year when the bloom appeared, we got a signal they got a signal in their research and it let us know like the same week essentially, which is faster than we would have gotten if we'd sent it out. And they let us know, look, there, we noticed toxins. They were, I think, 0.03. It was low. Like even with a really visible bloom, it was quite low. And so we upped our monitoring at the beach and we didn't see anything. So that kind of partnership is how we're working right now. Like it works for the city for sure at our supervised beaches. And one of the outcomes of the research that we're like of the partnership that we're hoping to continue is figuring out a way to make that like part of our process, that more like rapid response. And I think we're making progress, but as Dave said, like a lot of this stuff isn't just like new to us in HRM. It's like unsettled science questions. So we're kind of we're learning with everyone else basically.
Okay, got it. All set. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Hartling.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, Dave and Elizabeth. This has been really helpful. My question has to do with what we can do in terms of mitigation strategies. If you have any thoughts in terms of prevention, you mentioned, nitrogen, phosphorus. Obviously, we can't control the temperature. Well, not really anyway. But in terms of immediate steps forward, do you have any thoughts, considerations? Are there opportunities for us to improve so that we might be able to experience our beaches better?
Yeah, I guess I don't have like the full picture for
Sure.
this sort of stormwater challenges that the city faces, but I think that is probably one of the key things to be looking at. Just controlling the influx of nutrients into these water bodies is really
Right,
the most
so
important
untreated
thing.
stormwater is, yeah. Anything you want to add to that, Elizabeth, or no?
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Chair, through you to the Councillor. Yeah, so that's something we're looking at as well. I mean, and one good thing is like we're really fortunate at HRM to be monitoring. So, the Lake Watchers program that my colleague Chris Kennedy runs, one of the things one of the primary parameters he's monitoring for is nutrient inputs. And we're working on identifying, are there places where a lot of nutrients are coming in that we could look at, maybe end of pipe treatment solution at like a beach in particular, for example. So, and some of this is coming through the piped stormwater system. Some of this is just overland runoff. Like I don't want to, specifically target our pipe system. Like it's any stormwater running over the land and getting into the water. So we're looking at like where are the sources of stormwater specifically coming into like these beaches and trying to target, think about like naturalization initiatives, opportunities for green infrastructure. We're trying to work with residents on managing like, even if you don't live on a lake, any centimeter of water that you catch on your property is water that's not getting into the lake and carrying contaminants. So those are the kind of programming that we're working on. And, we have started some naturalization initiatives at some of our beaches that is partially intended to capture stormwater specifically for this reason. But, lakes are huge systems. And so it's not going to be a quick fix, but there's things that we can definitely do to mitigate, what's getting into our lakes, especially in our really urban areas.
Amazing, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hartling. There are no other questions from councillors, so thank you very much, Mr. Redden. Thank you, Elizabeth. I encourage my colleagues, if you ever have a chance to go out with Lake Watchers, it's a lot of fun to go out on the lake and do the sampling. Done that a couple of times so far and really enjoyed it, but they don't let me ride the boat. They don't let me drive the boat. So anyway, so thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and appreciate your work. So our next item on the agenda is 10.3.2, and it is Dustin O'Leary to speak to the closed loop hydro renewable energy storage project with Santa Barbara Mining. And so welcome, Dustin, and Tess Donahue, who is the project manager with Natural Forces. You have 10 minutes. And we appreciate you coming and presenting as well. Thank you. Councillor Steele, after this presentation, I may ask you to take the chair. I will have a motion after this presentation, if you don't mind. Thank you. A heads up.
Okay, great. Thank you for having us. My name is Tess Donahue, and I'm a project manager at Natural Forces, and I'm joined by Dustin O'Leary from St. Barbara. So today we're going to be presenting on a proposed pumped hydro energy storage project located at the Touquoy Gold Mine. This is just a quick agenda, so we'll start with an intro to the companies, background on our partnership, go into more details about what pumped hydro is, and how it would work in Nova Scotia, and then kind of a more detailed overview of this project specifically, and then chat about next steps and our ongoing work. So as I said, I'm Tess Donahue, a project manager at Natural Forces. So Natural Forces is a private independent power producer founded and based here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. But we do have teams in New Brunswick, BC, France, and Ireland. So we've been active in the renewable energy sector since 2001. And we have wind, solar storage, and hydro projects in operation across Canada, about 300 megawatts, and then thousands of megawatts of projects in development here in Canada, as well as in Ireland and France. So as an independent power producer, we're not only developers, but we also finance, construct, operate, and own these renewable energy projects for the lifetime. And all of our projects are meaningful equity partnerships, mainly with Indigenous and First Nations communities, but we also have partnered with universities and communities in the past. So I will hand it over to Dustin to chat a bit more about St. Barbara.
Good. Thank you. Thank you to the chair. Always a pleasure to be back at council. So I'm here, of course, representing St. Barbara. I'm the communications manager. We're a global gold mining company located, our operations here in Nova Scotia are located, our central offices in Bedford. And we do have our Simberi operation over in New Guinea. The Touquoy mine, which is located in Mooseland, just outside of Musquodoboit, is, of course, if you know, started operations in 2018 and ended its gold mining operations in late 2023. But during the construction and operation phases, the mine created over $500 million in economic activity for the province and municipality, and enjoyed employing over 330 Nova Scotians. Talking about the Touquoy mine specifically, now the mine is in the reclamation phase, so we are working to restore that site to a natural state. And to date, over $10 million has been spent on reclamation activities by the company to do that. It is a commitment to the province of Nova Scotia, and we fully intend to meet that commitment. Most notably, probably in the last little while, is we just completed an agreement with the province of Nova Scotia to supply 220 hectares of offsetting land for the disturbance area of Touquoy. So part of the deal with the province is that you not only reclaim the site itself, but you replace the amount of land disturbed. So we've done that and extended some of their existing protected areas as part of that. Just to give a little bit, if I can move to the partnership background, Natural Forces and Atlantic Mining, or St. Barbara, are working together to explore the feasibility and of the pumped hydro energy storage, which Tess will so aptly talk about in a second here. But the partnership did actually come about pretty naturally with St. Barbara and Natural Forces. So as operations at Touquoy wound down, we were looking to identify and understand other uses for the site. And Natural Forces, of course, is keenly aware of the need for long-duration energy storage from renewable sources, and has experience in the pumped hydro world already. So the companies met, and in May of 2024, we undertook a feasibility study on a closed-loop hydro project for the Touquoy mine, and find ourselves here today to present it to the Environment and Sustainability Committee. So thank you. With that, I'll hand it back to Tess to get more technical.
Okay, so I guess I'll just jump in on kind of what pumped hydro energy storage is. So at a high level, a pumped hydro energy storage system is a storage technology that consists of two reservoirs full of water at different elevations, and the water and gravity are used to store and generate energy. So during periods of increased energy demand, water would be released from that upper reservoir, flow down to the lower reservoirs through pipes, and run through turbines to generate energy and add additional electricity to the grid in Nova Scotia. And then during periods of low demand, or potentially also if there's excess renewable energy being generated, the pumped hydro system would absorb that excess energy and use it to pump the water from the lower reservoir back up to the upper reservoir to be stored and ready for kind of the next time it needs to be used. So here we have just a little kind of schematic, I guess, that we put together. So this specifically is a closed loop pumped hydro system, which means there's no natural inflows or outflows. It's like two pools connected with a pipe, basically. So the only kind of water entering or leaving the system would be rainfall or groundwater, things like that. So as you can see, there's the upper reservoir. The water flows down to the pump turbine unit, down to the lower reservoir, which would be connected directly to the grid. And then it would go back up through the same pipes with the excess energy that's on the grid to pump it back up to the upper reservoir. So we can kind of think about this like a rechargeable battery, makes it a little bit easier to understand. So when you want to charge the battery, as I mentioned, the surplus energy is used to pump the water from the lower reservoir up to the upper reservoir. And then instead of chemical energy like you would see in a lithium ion battery, the batteries in your phone, things like that, the pumped hydro system actually stores this energy in the form of gravitational potential energy from the water being elevated. And then when you need to use the battery, you discharge the energy like as if you were drawing power from a battery. So you allow the water to flow back down through the turbines and generate electricity. And like a rechargeable battery, you can recharge and reuse the pumped hydro system over and over again and kind of keep this cycle going for decades. Okay, so now I'll kind of talk a little bit about Nova Scotia's energy landscape and why pumped hydro makes sense here. So as many of you know, probably all of you, that fossil fuels dominate Nova Scotia's energy mix. In 2022, coal accounted for 28% of electricity generation. I am realizing this may actually have been an older version. I think that this was taken from a different presentation and these numbers are not correct, but are kind of, I have the updated numbers here. So coal accounts for 44% of electricity generation in 2022. And in 2021, renewables made up around 26% of the energy mix, and wind contributed approximately 13% of the total generation in the province. And then also, as you probably know, the intermittency of renewables presents kind of a challenge to maintain the grid reliability. So future goals in Nova Scotia, Nova Scotia is aiming to have a carbon neutral economy by mid-century with the goal of 80% renewable electricity by 2030, and to completely phase out coal by 2030 as well, which means that we need to significantly increase our reliance on renewables. So the need for energy storage comes from there. With increasing renewable energy, storage solutions are needed to kind of maintain that grid stability, especially during periods of low wind, like in the summer, or low solar, as we sometimes lack some sun in this province. So you might be wondering then why pumped hydro specifically. So this pumped hydro project would provide large-scale, cost-effective storage and be able to store hundreds of megawatt hours of energy, making it ideal for the long duration needs. Batteries typically can only generate or provide energy for about 4 hours. So this allows longer duration energy production, also at a higher capacity. But specific benefits of pumped hydro include that they can balance supply and demand. So they provide backup power during peak usage and help prevent grid overload. They also provide inertia, so that regulates the fluctuations in frequency and helps provide stability to the grid, which is really important because wind and solar do not provide that inertia capability on their own. They also have an extremely long lifespan. With the kind of proper operations and maintenance, these systems can operate for up to 50 to 100 years even, and they're highly efficient. So the energy conversion efficiencies can be upwards of 80%, which if you compare that to wind, for example, you're typically looking at a capacity factor of around 35 to 45%. So if your potential was a 10 megawatt project, you'd be looking at producing 3.5 to 4.5 megawatts, whereas these are up to 80%. So yeah, as I mentioned, it also supports the integration of renewable energy by mitigating those intermittency issues. Nova Scotia, we're really lucky to have a great wind regime. And although it feels like it's windy all the time here, especially in the summer, that wind is not always blowing as hard as we need it to produce the energy required. So this can help support that. And then also it has a very low ecological impact in comparison to a lot of other energy projects. In this case, we'd be looking at using previously disturbed lands to kind of minimize that ecological disturbance. So with that, we can kind of look at the project site here and see those previously disturbed lands. So as we mentioned, this would be located at the Tukoi Gold Mine site. So the lower reservoir would be where the open pit was or is currently. So no, it would be very minimal kind of disturbance that would have to go on in the lower reservoir. The water would just need to be filled. And then the upper reservoir would be located at the current administration complex. So we'd be looking at doing kind of a cut and fill where we would dig a bit and then use the materials, the soil there, to create dikes and build those up. So that preliminary design, this is very preliminary, high level. This will likely change, but we are looking at an 80 megawatt closed loop system with approximate generation time of 6.5 hours and 84.4% round trip efficiency. So I can kind of, I'll pop over. This is the look, the kind of conceptual layout that we're looking at right now for the project. And then I can hand it off very quickly to Dustin to talk about our next steps and ongoing work.
There we go. I think we're good. Yes. Thank you, Tess.
You're out of time, so I'm going to give you
I will be so fast with this. So I appreciate it, Chair. We'll continue our engineering design work together between Natural Forces and St. Barbara to work on refining the project design. We do have some consultation engagement, of which this is part, but also with First Nations and provincial and federal government regulators and local community members and special interests. We've already started some of that, but it will continue. And then, of course, we'll do regulatory review and preliminary environmental scoping and studies. So with that, on behalf of Tess and I, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dustin. Thank you, Tess. Before I leave the chair, any questions from members of council? Yes, Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation. I was really excited to hear this. I have a bit of a background in renewables, and I love this. It's just the simplicity of the design versus mining and making batteries and storing them later. I think it's great. And 513 megawatts, that's big. Yes, this is like the size of a reactor, like the amount of energy. Go ahead.
Sorry. So it's 513 megawatt hours.
Megawatt hours,
80
thank you.
80 megawatts.
80 megawatts, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind
Thank
of the
you.
maximum size that this project could be, depending on the needs of the grid and what makes the most sense for the site. That could decrease a bit, but that 513 megawatt hours is kind of what we're looking at. Could be longer duration with lower kind of capacity, but 80 megawatts is the max.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I did see that. Okay, so my question is, what limits the lifespan of a facility like this?
Thank you for the question. Mainly, it would be the kind of mechanical aspects of the project. So those can be replaced, like the turbines, the pumps. The rest of the project is mainly roads, surface pipes and a dike. So the lifespan of those is very, very long, and with proper maintenance can continue, but it would really just be the whether it makes sense to continue to replace kind of those mechanical, the pump generator, things like that, over and over again. But if it did make sense, you could hypothetically
keep
keep
doing
it going kind of,
Yeah.
forever.
And just finally, could you give some examples of where this is up and running in other places?
Yeah. So here in Canada, I think there may be one in Ontario, and a couple that are proposed in Ontario, but there are a number in the US. It's actually quite popular there, as well as in Australia. That was kind of a case study that we used, was a project, an old mine in Australia, I think in Queensland, that had been reclaimed to use this project, to do this type of project. I'm not sure of the names off the top of my head, but if you need them, I can get
It's
them for
happening.
you.
This is not a first. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Steele?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I had a similar question to Councillor White. I was going to ask how proven the technology is, but I think you've addressed that. The other question I want to delve into a little more deeply is, you talked about environmental impacts not being as significant because you're using an already established site, in a sense. Can you speak a bit more about that? The minimization of the ecological disturbances, because I know some of the downsides for pumped energy relate to wildlife habitats, water flow, the construction of reservoirs and dams. Some of those things have impacts. So just, can you speak to the fact that you're kind of upcycling a site, so to speak? So maybe you can help me understand that a little better.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the question. That is very important to us. So I guess first off, this project would still go through kind of an environmental permitting and assessment process, where all of, wildlife, vegetation, those ground studies would still happen. But this site is being used, or was being used, for industrial reasons already. So rather than having to use a lake or a river where there's kind of naturally wildlife in the water, you would be filling kind of industrial site to create this reservoir. And then in terms of, I guess, the upper reservoir, it's an administration complex. I'm sure Dustin can speak a little bit more about the kind of site itself and what exists there, but it's industrial, so there's very little wildlife in the area, and any that exists would be studied, and kind of the proper mitigation steps would be taken.
I'll just add to that, Councillor, that as Tess said, talking about the site specifically, even though mining operations ceased in late 2023, the site has still been worked on as a reclamation site since then, and continues to be this day. So it certainly wouldn't be an area where it's been dormant for a few years and now now proposing to put something else. It's still a very active site from a reclamation perspective today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Seems like a pretty good idea. I mean, one of the challenges of the mining industry writ large is dig holes, and then after that it's just liability, and it can be hard to encourage sometimes good behavior in the industry in tending to these leftover sites. If the site continues to actually have an economic rationale for being, I think that probably aligns a lot of interest in the right kind of direction. So I think this seems like a good idea. I'm wondering about, there's no relation to the tailing ponds, I'm presuming here, like these are pristine holes rather than holes full of the mining leftovers. Is that the case? That's what I kind of understood there, from like where the admin building is and the existing pit versus the other tailing ponds off to the side?
I can do that one. You're correct. Yes, the where the admin site is sort of, from a topographical perspective, is much higher than the pit itself. The tailings pond at Tukoi is still being it's part of the reclamation process for us, but would not be consumed by this project in any way. And just to provide some clarity on the reclamation of the tailings facility itself, one of the things it really needs to do is dry out. And whereas in other more sunshiny parts of the world it may take months, in Nova Scotia it will take years. So but we continue to do what we can with that while we're waiting for that process to happen, and it is ongoing. So we'll continue our effort to reclaim that as we go along.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I wasn't meaning my comment about the mining industry was writ large, not meant to single out you folks, because frankly, I don't know enough to say one way or the other. It's not my regulatory bailiwick. On your slide, you mentioned municipal approvals. Would this just be a land use sort of thing? Because I mean, we're not in the electric business.
Yeah, that's correct. Just kind of, I'd say less so municipal approvals, just municipal conversations, engagement.
Yeah.
Make sure that.
Where there's already an industrial site, I'm not even sure that there'd be anything on our end whatsoever. Thank you for the presentation. It's an interesting idea.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Hartling.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to you both for the presentation. It's very exciting technology, and I'm so excited that it's coming to Nova Scotia as well. My question, I think, is probably the most simple one coming from the people here, and that is, can you speak to the volume of water that you were talking about? And is it already on site? How is it? I feel like for the size and scope of what you're talking about, is it there presently? It doesn't appear to be. And just to kind of follow up with the whole trailings thing, I know that, water can be a little bit problematic with like heavy rains, hurricanes, things like that. So I'm just kind of confirming that there's even just for my own peace of mind, if I could, if you could speak a little bit to what is happening proactively to make sure that stormwater doesn't interfere with trailings and things like that moving forward. Thank you so much. Great presentation.
So I'm realizing I do not have the exact number for the volume on my slides here. How the water would get there, part of it would be natural filling through rain, natural inflows, but likely we would need to pump water from a nearby water source. That's still something that's being contemplated in the kind of design and engineering phase of the project. In terms of any stormwater or events, kind of water, making sure nothing's overflowing. So we are looking at a few options for that. Currently, I think we have about a 3-meter freeboard, so there's a fair bit of space between where the water is and the top of that upper reservoir. For the lower reservoir, there is, I want to say, potentially up to like 10 meters or something. So that's not really a massive concern in the lower reservoir, any overflow. We are also potentially looking at an overflow spillway. So that would be located in the upper reservoir, and it would just be a fail-safe in case there was any, whether the project failed, had some form of failure, or there was a lot of rain, more than usual. It would flow into a kind of specific, I'm losing my words right now, but flow over into kind of a spillway that would take the water away. Again, though, kind of that is not something that we see as a huge risk, something that's being considered in our engineering studies, but it'll be designed to ensure that any water that would leave the system is properly treated before it would leave the system, and that it's very unlikely that any water would kind of overflow in a way that hasn't been accounted for in the design. I hope that helps answer your question.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hartling. Councillor Steele, if you would. mind? Thank you. Dorothy, if you could buzz me in down there.
Councillor Daigle Gammon, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Steele, interim chair. Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Tess, for the coming in. Unique situation, but not always unique, in that instead of me phoning a friend, the friend has sort of texted me with his question. So for Councillor Hensby, here we have. How much energy is generated from the downflow of water versus how much energy is needed to pump it back up? And he says, hopefully not the same. And the second part of his question, and does this hook directly into the local 3-phase power lines, or does it need to be connected to a major transmission corridor?
So in terms of how much energy would be needed to pump it up, I think we're looking at an 84.4% efficiency rate. So it would need more energy to pump the water back up, but it's fairly similar, and that's a really good efficiency rate for one of these projects. Okay. So yes. And then in terms of the interconnection, that's something that we're still exploring with Nova Scotia Power. And kind of where, I think a big question is where this energy will be needed and where the grid stability support will be needed. So if it is intended to come back to Halifax, we might have to look at an interconnection option that would see a transmission line going towards Halifax or interconnecting kind of there. And if it is needed elsewhere in the province, then we will look at connecting kind of to the existing transmission line that is on site at Tukoi. So something that we're still exploring.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for those answers. So colleagues, Councillor Hensby and I had actually met with Dustin and another person from Natural Forces, I believe. So we had a little bit of a heads up about this and connected with our environment staff as well before sort of thinking that this is a good place to come and have a presentation. And really it is about information for us in terms of HRM, because all of the approvals really happen at the provincial level. So, but when we think about, the whole mining industry and there is the need for the reclamation, it's really nice to see companies looking for innovation and how to do that reclamation in the best way possible. So I do love the idea of this project. I think it's great. A little bit, not a little bit, it's very technical. Right, so I'm kind of glad the province has the decision at the end of the day in a way, but I do have a motion because I do believe it is a project that I think HRM should support in some way. So the motion is that the Environment and the Sustainability Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to provide a staff report to consider a municipal level letter of support to Nova Scotia's Minister of Energy and the Premier of the Province of Nova Scotia for the Santa Barbara and Natural Forces closed loop hydro renewable energy project proposed for the site of the former Turquoise gold mine in Moose River, Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Councillor Hartling.
Thank you for the second, Councillor Hartling. It's really interesting, I think, that this is like for a staff report. This project is going to go forward anyway to the province, and this is it's not a requirement, but I think that it's a nice add-on to their work. So I would hope that you would support the request for the staff report to consider this letter. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Yes, I was just going to ask the presenters maybe to, just based on Councillor Hensby's question, maybe to make it really clear what energy storage is used for, because that how this helps us to have more renewables on our grid. This is not a generation of additional energy. It's to allow other things to happen. Could you explain that a little more, please?
So there's a few different things. Renewables are quite intermittent. So if the wind is not blowing, the sun is not shining, we're not producing as much energy with the addition of renewables. So in that case, when there is kind of extra demand and not enough energy being produced, then this storage project could provide that additional energy that's required. But also what happens is that there are times when we are overproducing. So in that case, rather than having to curtail projects, we could absorb that excess energy. And then also, I think I had kind of mentioned the kind of inertia requirement. So inertia helps to regulate changes in frequency on the grid, and solar and wind projects do not provide inertia directly to the grid. So with this project being used, it could also just support kind of the stability of the grid in general.
Thank you.
Councillor Hartley.
Thank you very much, Councillor. One last question, and if you can't answer it, that's okay. But I feel like this might be a net positive for the jobs in that area. Do you have any thoughts or rough cut numbers that you could speak to in terms of employment opportunities or advantages, economic or otherwise, for that community?
At this point, I would say no. We will certainly endeavor to flesh that out further as we get closer to permitting from an environmental assessment perspective. But at this point, no. But I agreed. I agree with your sentiment, Councillor, that it's probably hopefully a good usage and continued usage of an existing brownfield site.
Thank you, Councillor Hartling. Seeing no other names on the board, I'll call for the question. Okay. So we'll move for a vote. We can vote by show of hand or by saying aye. So we'll ask for the vote now, please, on the motion. Do we need to see the motion, or is it? Oh, there it is. Okay, it's up there. Great, thank you. I wasn't looking at the board. I was looking at the group. Okay, so will all those in favor raise their hand or say aye? Contrary minded, nay. The motion has passed. Vice Chair, would you like to return to the chair? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Tess, for your presentation. We're all going to look forward to future updates on how this progresses through the system. Thank you. So our next item on the agenda is 10.3.3. So we will welcome Peter Lund. Silty groundwater discharges to watercourses and wetlands during early stages of land development. Welcome, Mr. Lund. It's nice to see you, and you have 10 minutes to present, and then there will be questions afterwards, I'm sure. Thank you.
Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. Further to Mr. Redden's presentation, I just wanted to let folks know, and Mr. Redden know as well, I think the situation within lakes, particularly Dartmouth area, is a result of my dog dying earlier than he should have, because I remember back in 2017 I used to take my dog out to Shuby Park, and in the hot summer I loved going in the water to cool off. And I remember a couple times in the summer, I think it was back in 2017, I noticed these green colored film on the water, being algae. Shortly thereafter he got quite ill, intestinal and stomach problems that became chronic. And I think that led to his earlier death than needed to be. I attribute it was to the bacteria that was in the lake, so I just thought I wanted to mention that. So it does affect the animals as well. I'm not sure. Oh, I have to click on here? I'm not. How do I go from one slide to another? Which do I click to move to the next slide? Right there? Okay, thank you. Thank you. And the reason why I'm here, this is a topic of my discussion, and you'll notice that the silty water, colored water, brown water, and I've noticed this at a number of sites, development sites across H or M for over 20 years now. So finally, 3 years ago, I decided to take action and see if we can't fix some of this. So that's the reason why I'm here today. So thank you for the invite. So how does this happen? We all know about surface water runs downhill. So here we have, this is a cross section. You'll see on here the water table. And so what happens is that once you disturb the overburden, then the rainwater that infiltrates the ground goes down into the groundwater table. And once you disturb the overburden, it carries the silt and fine clay materials down into the groundwater. Groundwater flows downhill as well, and then discharges to wherever the nearest water course is. So by way of example, I'm going to show a couple of examples, but this one relates to Eisner's wetland. So here you'll see an aerial view of Eisner's wetland, which was the largest wetland in all of urban HRM. And you can see this is a shot taken off, you can see Highway 111, and that's Mount Hope Boulevard that you see running next to Eisner's wetland. And I just wanted to show this, it just gives you an appreciation of how large this wetland is. And all of that green forested area that you see to the right, adjacent to the wetland, is where Southdale development is occurring. So back in 2022, when Southdale Developments was looking to get approval, they got fast-tracked to the Nova Scotia Housing Authority, and this is their initial site plan that they had. And you'll see it's quite dense, and you'll see in the middle, you'll see a small stormwater management pond to collect surface water from the development after it's completed. Now I just want to point out, see the green buffer area, the tree buffer area? Just keep that in mind as we get to a few slides later. So here we have all this excavation taking place back in 2022. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to back up one more. Now, when this came out for public comment on the development agreement, I did submit comments, but I also submitted back in May 2022, which I've sent you folks a copy of this to the clerk, dated May 2022. And I said, this has been a chronic problem across HRM for quite some time, and it's not everywhere. The problem relates to if the overburden is what I call a sandy, silty till, which means it's more permeable. We do have clay overburden. We have clay till across HRM too. On those properties, it's not a problem. So when this first came out for public comment, the first thing I did look at was the borehole logs, because you have to drill borehole logs and test pit logs as part of any development agreement. So as soon as I saw the borehole logs, voila, I saw that it was a sandy silt till, which means that it's permeable. And I said, we're going to have a problem here. And so not only did I provide public comments when it went out, but I also wrote this letter, which you folks have a copy of. I sent it to the Premier, the Mayor, all the councillors, the Housing Task Force, outlining my concerns. So you folks have a copy of that. So for reference, it kind of summarizes what my concerns are. So here we have clear cutting at the beginning of Southdale development. Voila, here we have this part of the grubbing. You'll notice on the slide on the left, you'll see the silt fences, And behind the silt fences, you see water gathering there. So they purposely dug it deeper so that any runoff would go there. But the problem is, as you'll see on the right-hand slide, when you have heavy rainfall, like we've been having, look what happens. The silt runs under the silt fences, but we also have groundwater that from that collected water area discharging to the wetland, and this is what the impact of the wetland was. This is back in 2022. Farther downstream from the previous photograph, this is what we had. So here you see all the silty water. And here's a cross-section of development. So all that whole area, sort of in the upper levels, that's the whole area that's been being clear-cut for Southdale development. And there you'll see the cross-section, which is in one of the reports that you folks, and I've hand-drawn where the groundwater table is. You'll see how steep the slope is. The steeper the slope, the worse the situation with groundwater discharge going into the wetland. So here we have another one that appeared 2 months ago, or a month and a half ago. This one's a little more difficult to see, but this is, you see Hammonds Plains Road that runs through here. You see Yankeetown Road, and the blue circle that I've drawn, this is a new development that's occurring called Perry's Pond Development. It's off Pockwalk Road. I got a call from, an email from somebody I know. An active canoeist saying, oh my gosh, there's all this silt going into Cox Lake. And Cox Lake is right here in the center of the plan. And Cox Lake, by the way, just so you know, is the upper reaches of the 9 Mile River watershed, which is the new strategic planning committee being set up for that. So it's right up in the upper watershed up in here in this area, just to put it into perspective. So it does flow, Cox Lake does flow into Flat Lake, Long Lake, down into other lakes and into the 9 Mile River. So I went out and drove up Yankeetown Road. What did I see? This is what I saw. Here we have Yankeetown Road. That's the water that's flowing beneath Yankeetown Road, the slide on your left, going down to Cox's Lake. So I followed the stream upstream, wondering where is this silt coming from, and lo and behold, this on the right-hand side is this new development. And it's all clear-cut, just like Southdale development. Same situation. Here's the clear-cut area on your left. I just want to highlight here, look at the silt fences. Silt fences are up on the mound, and just below the silt fences you do have silty water. So even the silt fences aren't constructed properly. They never generally are, as you see in the previous photographs, Southdale developments. So the groundwater and surface water from this clear cut flows into Perry's Pond, which is on the right photograph. Now, you can't really see it, but Perry's Pond now has become what I call a siltation pond. It's completely filling up with silt. The overflow from Perry's Pond goes down, you see in the previous photograph, down into Cox's Lake. I looked at this a month and a half ago and I said, you're going to see this for the next 2 years before it gets cleared out. Now here's my third example, and I just wanted to show you, this is a really small example. This is probably 5-6 years ago in Voyager Estates. Now on the left photograph you'll see that there's a clear-cut area. It looks like they're just probably be putting 5 or 6, half a dozen homes. They've got a silt fence along there. I got out of my car and looked at the ditch. Didn't see any silty water in the ditch. Went about 100 meters downhill. What did I see? Look at this photograph. You see the silty water coming out of there? Down along, this is where the ditch ends up at. So here, this silty water flows underneath the culvert into another wetland. This one is not as bad as the previous ones you've seen. So I didn't report it, and I just thought to myself, the developer doesn't have a clue what's going on because there's nothing happening on the site. This is 100 meters downhill. So I want to take you back just to finalize here. Southdale, this is 2024. That whole eastern portion now has been developed. You'll see where the silt fences are. And the photograph on your right here is the stormwater retention pond. And you'll see the wetland. Now, remember I pointed out the green buffer? Where's the green buffer? The silt fences and that orange fencing is right along the edge of the wetland. So they were permitted in the development agreement to put the pond, the collection stormwater pond, within the buffer zone and put roadways. So now we have development right to the edge. There is no tree line buffer between the site and the wetland. So I just wanted to point that out, which to me is a bit problematic. So there is no buffer zone. Here we have 2025. You'll see that the on the left, you'll see the stormwater retention ponds are completed now. That looks like it's grassed over. And look how much water is in the wetland there to your left that's circled as well. That's coming still from groundwater. Mind you, it doesn't look as bad silty-wise, but look at the photograph on the right. This was taken back in April. This is further downslope. So groundwater is still discharging to the wetland. Mind you, this area has been completed, and I believe they're excavating their other stage 2, which is probably causing a lot of this problem as well. So here we are from 2022, 2025, it's still a problem. Now, what people always say is, well, the Nova Scotia Environment sends out their inspectors, you know, if I report it. The Department of Environment inspector has been out here quite several times. What's been done? You know, my issue is that's being reactionary. What you need to do, HRM needs to step up to the plate, or should step up to the plate and be proactive and prevent this from happening in the first place, and one can do that.
Mr. Lund, your time is up. But
Oh, I'm sorry, can I just...
No, if you're almost finished, we'll...
Yeah, well, I'm
continue.
almost finished. I'm talking a bit. I always talk too long. Just so you know, too, the previous photograph, this is the end of the Eisner's wetland. It goes into a stormwater. You'll see it in blue. It goes all the way down into Dartmouth Harbor. Even Halifax Water got involved a month and a half ago, saying, where the heck is all this silty water coming from? High precipitation events, this is participation events. We have higher intensity, shorter duration rainfall events that's been ongoing now for over 20 years. And this is what the rainfall event was back in April. So solutions, be proactive, not reactive. Require groundwater be assessed in addition to surface water. Use grain size analysis. You mentioned, you can tell by the grain size whether it's going to be a problem or not. Amend the bylaws accordingly. Lot grading bylaw, grade alterations, require specification for preventive measures. Buffers should not include any grade alteration, tree cutting, or surface water collection ponds, as you've seen in the previous photograph. And surface water collection ponds should be partially lined to intercept shallow groundwater. That's one solution. So really, basically, what you need to do is integrate surface water and groundwater management plans to ensure no flooding. So what you need to do is just add the word groundwater to surface water in the bylaws to be looked at. And take into account the high-intensity, shorter duration rainfall events. The feds have done this since 2002. I just wanted to share one good news story, and then I'll be finished. The new Goodwood Organic Processing Facility, this is probably, what, 3 or 4 years ago? When they were excavating, this is off Prospect Road, which has silty sandy till as well. I got called out because the Blue Line Brook that you see to your left flows into a wetland. People know my background as a hydrogeologist, called me up, and I went and took a look at it. I was invited to participate in a Zoom meeting with HRM, the local citizen committee, and the designer from out in Calgary, I believe. I sat in on a Zoom meeting, showed them what the problem was, and guess what? They implemented measures. They put tarps up, they dug a deeper pond, I think they put a barrier wall in. I'm not sure of everything they've done, but they put measures in, they stopped it. So the reason why I wanted to point this out, I encourage HRM staff to take a look at what was done here and use this as an example of what can be done after the fact. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you very much.
So that ends my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lund. Peter, colleagues, I neglected to let you know that Mr. Lund is a former counselor within HRM, and was a counselor when in Dartmouth when I wanted to get land from HRM. So I again get to be in your presence and say thank you for all your help. So the first counselor with a question for you, Mr. Lund, and thank you for the presentation, is Counselor Hartling.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And again, thank you so much, Peter, for coming. Colleagues, so you know, I actually asked for Peter to come and present because I think that this is such an important subject matter, particularly as we tackle these bigger and bigger developments that are ever so close to water and watersheds that are so near and dear to us. I also really think that what Mr. Lund is trying to highlight here is something that I am learning as I sit on council, that unfortunately we are however good we are at understanding development in the moment, we create agreements that are much more centered around how it will be after it is already established, and we don't think enough about it as we could during the build phase. And I think that this is a great step in the right direction, pointing the municipality towards what we be doing to make sure that we are protecting our water courses and our watersheds, our lakes, streams, and rivers as we pursue these big developments and small developments alike. And again, Peter, aside from being a counselor, and you did drop it in, I'm hoping that you can tell the folks here exactly your credentials. You don't come by way of this as a hobbyist by any stretch of the imagination. This is your bread and butter. This is yeah. So if you could just speak to your credentials a little bit first.
Yes, I've been a hydrogeologist since 1981. So my specialty is groundwater quality, quantity, as well as surface water quality.
Right.
Which I've tested for many years. So.
Yep. And you're also now an active member on the 9 Mile River Watershed Committee, and for that
Correct.
we are all very, very grateful. But as I think about the developments happening, not just in District 13, but beyond, certainly the one around Lake Banook, obviously the Halifax Exhibition Center and its proximity to the Western Commons watershed, I feel like this work and endeavoring to understand how we can develop better and safer for our water systems is a critical piece of the puzzle for us to ask and understand. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention as well, the Exhibition Park development proposal, when they had the Public Information Center, I went out there and talked to the consultant that was representing the developer, and I showed him pictures. Do you want this to happen at your site? Because there's a huge wetland right next to Exhibition Park. So when I showed him those pictures, he said, uh-oh. And I said, at that time, if you recall, Penhorn, remember the Penhorn? It was in the media last year. As soon as I heard that in the media, I said, I bet you anything that's coming from groundwater as well. You know, that's causing the impact to the lake. So I said to the developer's representative, do you want to really face this media attention? So he said, oh, I'll call you in when we get going, because I said there's no regulations. There's nothing in the bylaws require anything to be done. So that's why I'm sitting here today. We should be putting in preventative measures to prevent this thing from happening in the first place.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you, Councillor Hertling. Councillor Steele. Oh, sorry. Councillor Austin is next. Sorry.
That's all right, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Peter, for the presentation. I was thinking of Penhorn, actually, as you were talking, because that was just kind of deluge after deluge after deluge into the lake, and nothing much seemed to happen. It seemed like all engagement with HRM staff on it and Department of Environment staff didn't seem to amount to a whole lot. There seemed to be a lot of weakness, a lot of old rules, and a lot of this going on and all at the same time. It was very frustrating. I'm wondering, because if you talk to some of our folks, they point to the province as the primary regulatory authority on this. I'm wondering, have you, I know we're more reachable, but have you had the chance to talk to anyone about at the province about updating their own requirements and regulations on these on these issues?
I did, Counselor, but that was probably, well, it was back in 2022 as well. I went and talked to some of the people at their environment office and just mentioned that this is a problem, and they should take responsibility as well, you know, in terms of addressing these issues and amending any of their regulations as well, you know, in terms of policies and procedures to better protect wetlands as well. So, but I've not heard of anything being done.
Nor have I. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I had a similar question to Councillor Austin, just about what sort of advocacy you've done with the province. I see that you have included Premier Houston on this correspondence that you also sent to shared with us. You were fairly specific on our existing bylaws, and you had some specific recommendations for bylaw changes, particularly around the inclusion of groundwater, not just surface water. Can you delve a little deeper into that, please?
I haven't specifically gone through the bylaws and edited it myself, because I thought that perhaps HRM staff is more appropriate to be able to do that. But really, essentially, you know, when in the various bylaws, they mention stormwater. You know, you have to deal with stormwater during development with clear cutting, and also afterwards, as you see, stormwater management plan. So simply, the easiest way of looking at it, just add groundwater to it. Wherever it says stormwater, just say groundwater has to be looked at as well. And even if the developer's consultant, when they do the borehole logs, if they look at it and it's not permeable, if it's not a sandy silt till and it's not going to become a problem, then their consultant can say, yeah, it's not going to be a problem at this site, and so we've addressed it. It's not a problem everywhere. It just depends on the overburden characteristic. It's a big problem along hand. I just want to say that my experience, the biggest problem is along Prospect Road. Okay. But it also appears to be a problem on Hannah's Plains Road as well.
Okay. I think my question too sort of related to how much of the issue is coming from groundwater and how much is coming from the surface water.
Good question. Because we have higher intensity, shorter duration rainfall events, as you'll see in this one of my slides, you know, we have like over 100 millimeters of rain in like, what, 3-4 hours?
Yes.
That siltation pond, or surface water retention pond at Southdale, undoubtedly probably overflowed with silty water too. So that whole aspect needs to be accounted for when they design even surface water collection ponds. They should be addressing the fact that we have these high rainfall events in a short duration of time, so the surface water management plan needs to reflect that. Now the feds back in, I think 2002, 2003, because I've done work for the feds as a consultant, and they realized that there was a problem back then with rainfall events due to climate change. So they said, okay, we need to address and design everything to account for this. So they refer to as 1 in 200 year storm, whether that's the right wording or not to use, but they actually designed to accommodate it. But the province nor municipalities have taken the initiative, as the feds did.
Okay. So you'd actually like us to look at the bylaw for its adequacy with respect to severe weather as well as the inclusion of groundwater.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was getting
And
at.
the requirements should be included in the development agreements as relates to specific sites and requirements as well by the developer to address these issues. And the other thing, I'm glad you asked this question, sorry I didn't have a chance to mention it, the proper water balance. Because one of the other concerns we have is not only higher rainfall events, but we have prolonged dry periods. Look at the wildfires. So my concern as well, what's the water balance from surface water and groundwater? Does that mean we're going to have the wetlands dry out in the summer? Could be. And flood during high rainfall events, rather than having a proper balance. So the whole, that's what I refer to as a proper water balance, to ensure that receiving waters don't dry out and don't flood with silty water.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. And, I'm doing the very dangerous thing of trying to draft on the fly here. I'm wondering if there was an appetite from committee for a motion on this point that we could put forward. I guess then I'm seeing some nods. So I'll move that the Environmental Standing Committee request the CEO provide a staff report on potential updates to the lot grading and stormwater bylaws that would reduce the impact of runoff from development sites on both surface and groundwater.
Seconded by Councillor Hartling. And Dorothy, I just sent that to you by email, so you have it. So, Councillor Austin, you want to continue?
I feel like Peter's made the case, and I'll just add that in my own personal experience over the last number of years, seeing Penhorn developed and then Eisner's developed, both of which were in my district but are no longer. There was a lot in the process for both that left a lot to be desired in terms of impacts, and it's not. I'm hesitant to just say, well, it's like, oh, well, the big bad developer didn't do the job. From what I understand at Penhorn, they had a plan, right? Like they were meeting all the criteria and the conditions. And so, at a certain point, you got to look and say, well, perhaps we're not making people follow, people will follow the rules you give them. And if your rules aren't good enough, that's comes back more to you than necessarily to anyone else. So I think there is room on this, and we'll probably, when the report comes back, we'll probably run head on into the requirement to talk to our provincial folks.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Hartling.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Councillor Austin for having the great stick handling skills to turn this into something meaningful today, right now, because that was kind of an open question for me, is in terms of how do we make it make sense today. So thank you very much, and then again, thank you so much, Peter. The way that you so freely and openly share your expertise and time to make sure that we as a municipality are doing all we can, and for your volunteerism and all of your efforts in as we endeavor to protect our watersheds, our water courses, our lakes and streams. I really can't offer enough gratitude for all that you've done and continue to do. So thank you very much.
I don't know. Oh, here we go. And thank you, Councillor Austin, for passing the motion. And I just wanted to highlight the Goodwood Processing Facility. If staff takes a look at this as part of the review process, I think it would be very helpful in terms of what they did to stop this from happening, in terms of the measures that they took by way of example. I think it would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hartling. We're going to pause for one moment because we want to make sure that the language in the motion is accurate, because usually we will say direct the CAO. And so it's not that the Environment Committee can request a staff report. So we're just going to check on the language of the motion. If you're okay to proceed, knowing we might have a minor change, Councillor Steele, please do.
Yes. Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Councillor Austin. Part of the reason why I was asking our presenter detailed questions about what sort of amendments he was looking for in the bylaw was I was beginning to think that we needed to craft a motion. So thanks for doing that. And I'm supportive of the intent of the motion for sure, even though we haven't quite seen it yet. But the verbal one sounded good to me. So in support.
And we're so very lucky to have the very competent Dorothy here putting this on the screen for us in a moment. Councillor Austin, does this now look in a good way for you? Great. And the seconder was Councillor Hartling. Councillor Hartling, are you also okay with that as it's written? Great. Let's see, no further names are on the list. Call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Thank you very much. The motion is carried. And again, our thanks to you, former Councillor Peter Lund. Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is public participation. We did not have any names signed up prior to, but we will ask 3 times. Is there anyone from the gallery that would like to speak? Is there anyone from the gallery that would like to speak? For the third and final time, while Shannon gets set up, is there anybody from the gallery that would like to speak? And there is none. Elizabeth is saying that she doesn't really want to come up again, so we're all good. So information items brought forward, there are none, and we move on to reports. So 13.1.1 is amendments to bylaw L200 respecting licensing of construction and demolition, C&D, recycling and disposable operations. Our presenters are Elizabeth Mance, who is the Manager, Policy and Enforcement, and Shannon Betts, Director of Solid Waste, to provide a presentation and to answer any questions. Welcome.
Chair and members of the committee, thanks very much. Today I'll be presenting on our proposed amendments to bylaw L200. And this is the bylaw for the licensing of construction and demolition debris, or C&D debris facilities in HRM. Brief overview of the presentation. We'll start with taking a look at the municipal oversight of C&D debris. We'll then look at some recent updates to provincial regulations, which ultimately has prompted these amendments to bylaw L200. We'll also touch briefly on a couple of items that relate to the management of C&D debris, including treated wood and land use planning. So I guess to start, what is C&D debris? Construction and demolition, or C&D debris, refers to materials that are generated through construction, renovation, or demolition activities. This could include materials such as asphalt, brick, concrete, wood, drywall, asphalt shingles, and metals, for example. And bylaw L200, which is referred to as the C&D Materials Recycling and Disposal Bylaw, was originally enacted in 2001 with a few primary objectives, including to maximize the diversion of C&D debris through recycling, to increase economic activity and value-added processing of C&D materials, to allow for the proper disposal of debris that cannot be recycled, and finally to ensure minimal environmental, land use, and nuisance impacts from C&D facilities. Under bylaw L200, a license from the municipality is required to operate a C&D processing facility, a transfer station, or a disposal site. Under the previous provincial guidelines, an environmental approval from Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change was only required for disposal sites and not for transfer stations or processing facilities. So bylaw L200 provided a level of environmental oversight and accountability for these facilities operating within the municipality. And there are currently 3 active C&D facilities in HRM. There is a transfer and processing facility located on Mills Drive in Goodwood, a transfer station on Ross Road in Westphal, and a disposal site in Antrim. Bylaw L200 is considered to be quite a progressive bylaw, as there is a requirement to divert a minimum 75% of the materials received at transfer stations and processing facilities. So a 75% recycling or diversion rate. And in order to support the economic viability of C&D facilities operating within the municipality, given this required diversion rate, HRM prohibits the export of C&D debris outside the boundaries of the municipality. And we also require that C&D debris must be disposed of at a licensed C&D site. Just to clarify the scope of bylaw L200, L200 does not impact the siting of new facilities. Planning and development is responsible for any policy and regulation related to, for C&D related to land use. So for example, the location of a facility, built forms, landscaping, etc., as well as the methods of approval. So for example, site plans. And our understanding is there is a council report coming, targeting fall 2025, I believe, looking at ways to better mitigate impacts of C&D facilities on residential properties. So amendments to the Nova Scotia Environment Act prompted new guidelines for C&D debris in 2023. This came about after a departmental review of C&D sites across the province. They were looking at certain areas of concern, for example, fires, potential groundwater impacts, as well as just general community concerns. And following this province-wide review, it was determined that there was a need for province-wide standards for all facilities managing C&D debris, not just disposal sites. So these 2023 guidelines, a couple of main changes, I guess, in the new guidelines. There is now a requirement for all sites, all C&D sites, including storage, transfer, processing, and disposal, sites for C&D to hold an environmental approval from Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change. There are also enhanced requirements for groundwater monitoring, as well as stockpile limitations in terms of the size of the stockpile, as well as spacing for stockpiles. And there are also more stringent cell construction guidelines. And they've also now banned treated wood from being disposed of within a C&D debris disposal site. So treated wood can still be accepted at transfer and processing facilities with the idea that it be diverted for reuse or recycling, but in terms of disposal, it must now be disposed of within a municipal solid waste landfill. So given the province has now assumed oversight for all C&D debris facilities in the province, we have the opportunity to amend bylaw L200. There are a couple of benefits that I'll highlight. We can reduce the duplication between the regulations. We can also increase our focus on the diversion of C&D debris, again, with that minimum target of 75%. We can mitigate nuisances to the community, so for example, litter, and we can also reduce administrative burden. I will note that Administrative Order 27, which lists the materials banned from disposal within a C&D disposal site, as well as sets out the minimum recycling targets for C&D debris at transfer stations and processing facilities. The content of Administrative Order 27 has now been included within bylaw L200 with a recommendation to repeal Administrative Order 27. And as well as having the benefit of this consolidated information in one place, it also does give the municipality the ability to lay charges should an operator not meet the recycling targets, as these are now included within the bylaw itself. And of course, we also have the ongoing involvement by HRM staff in terms of quarterly monitoring at C&D facilities located within the municipality, as well as the monthly review of disposal and diversion data submitted. Other proposed amendments include an update to the term of license as well as the license renewal fee. The original term of license was 1 year with a $50 renewal fee. It's proposed to extend the term of license to align with the term of license for the environmental approval issued by Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change. So this would be between 5 and 10 years with a license renewal fee of $500 per term. And there's also an added requirement to identify a diversion plan as well as innovations in identifying recycling markets on an annual basis. For applications, there's a requirement to submit a litter management plan as well as a diversion strategy. And there's also updated insurance requirements. We originally had a commercial general liability of $2 million. That's been increased to $5 million. And there's an addition of environmental impairment liability at $5 million. And then finally, as I mentioned previously, we also have the addition of penalties now for non-compliance with meeting our minimum diversion targets. And then finally, a requirement under the province's environmental approval is for the submission of an operations and maintenance manual by the operator. We've added a requirement that this plan be shared with HRM for review. The operation and maintenance manual is a comprehensive plan that includes detailed descriptions of site plans, stockpile heights and separation distances, as well as operational procedures and the movement of traffic. It outlines emergency contingency plans, as well as air quality, noise, and odor controls. And then it provides an overview of the environmental monitoring program, as well as the testing schedule. And then to conclude, just a brief note on treated wood. As I mentioned, under the new provincial guidelines, treated wood is now banned from disposal at C&D disposal sites. Treated wood includes materials such as pressure-treated lumber and creosote timbers. So this material can still be accepted, as I mentioned, at transfer and processing facilities if it's diverted or recycled. But for disposal, as it's now considered municipal solid waste, it can now be sent for disposal outside the boundaries of the municipality, similar to other industrial, commercial, or institutional waste. So that brings me to the conclusion of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Shannon, for the support. We're just looking, Councillor White, would you like to put the motion on the floor as well and
Sure.
start the conversation and debate?
Will do. I move that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council adopt bylaw L202, the purpose of which is to amend bylaw L200 respecting the licensing of construction and demolition, recycling, and disposal operations, including repealing Administrative Order 27 respecting materials that shall not be disposed of in a C&D disposal site, as set out in Attachment B of the staff report dated April 1st, 2025.
Seconded by Councillor Austin. Thank you. Councillor White, floor is yours.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the environmental impairment liability. Is that an insurance that has existed before for a long time? Like, why wasn't it not applied before, and what's new about that?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. So I'm not sure what the history is on environmental impairment insurance in total, but as we were reviewing the requirements of the bylaw, it was recommended by our risk and insurance department that be a consideration to be made. With the environmental approvals held by the Nova Scotia Environment, they hold bonds against each of these sites in the millions of dollars, so that if something were to happen, they would have that recourse to be able to conduct remediation or any anything that had to be done to rectify any situations on that site. Mm-hmm. But the environmental impairment insurance is just kind of a more broad,
insurance policy that would cover, it could cover, and from runoff and things like that that may happen. And with the insurance requirement updates as well, we have requested or required that HRM be included as an additional insured on that, just to add that extra layer of protection should something happen.
Okay, so protection if HRM needs to deal with something, if the company does, and it's in addition to the bonds. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Hertling.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you, Shannon. You're both my favorite. I'm so grateful. We did have a bit of a powwow about what this means in terms of, additional protections. This isn't a taking away, this is an adding on. And for that, I am very grateful. I just want to say too, in terms of, or just speaking to the importance of innovation, having been at SWANA and Divert Nova Scotia, what these organizations and what you're asking of the C&D facility, looking at opportunities for us to recycle our waste, find other ways to use these recyclables to find markets. This is really impressive and exciting work, and it's exciting to see what C&D facilities are doing. Having toured the Goodwood facility, seeing that they shred tires and then that is then processed over in Dartmouth to create blast mats. And as I understand, we are the only, that facility creating those blast mats is the only one in existence. I think it is east of Ontario. So we are doing really, really important work in terms of recycling. Having read this through and having spoken to you, I have so much more confidence in this. But I am wondering, just because the word litter is in there, if you could take a moment and speak to what we can expect in terms of potential and opportunities in terms of, like I said, mitigation for communities, because historically Goodwood has not been served well by the C&D facility in Goodwood. That is no slight on the facility itself. I was honestly very impressed with what they are doing and what they are trying to achieve. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question. Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. So as we mentioned, we are requiring a litter management plan as an amendment in the new bylaw. This is a new requirement. I will note that the litter management plan is specifically for litter generated from the site itself. So it would be a management plan to make sure that things aren't blowing off site, that they're not becoming a nuisance to their neighbors in terms of their operations. I will acknowledge that in terms of folks visiting the site, that's an ongoing challenge. We've stepped up enforcement in terms of our enforcement officers being at the sites every couple of weeks, or I guess bi-weekly, to provide education about TARP loads and tickets where warranted, to try and change some behaviors and make sure that people are transporting their loads safely. And I understand that we are working on a new education campaign and a staff report related to that as well, and looking at opportunities to try and create some change in terms of just the general public as well as haulers, professional or, the weekend warriors, I think they're called, visiting the site and doing so in a responsible manner.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hertling. I see no other names on the list for questions, so when we call for the question, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Shannon. Always a pleasure to be in your company. And next we have motions, of which there are none. In camera, we have none. Added items, there is none. Notices of motion. We're good. Next meeting then is not until August 7th, 2020. Enjoy the rest of June and July, and we'll see each other all again on August 7th in this room. Would ask for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Council. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon and evening.